Today, you have landed on Island Money 365. I am your host, Petra Ian Brown. I am so happy you are here. Travel with me as we hear migration and money stories of triumph, perseverance, and struggles of immigrants and their descendants, along with amazing resources that can help make your landing a little less bumpy. Welcome back to the studio. We are here on Island Money 365, and today with us, we have Jorge Chiluisa. Hello.
Hey, how you doing, Petra?
Welcome to the studio. I am great. How are you?
Doing well, and thank you for inviting me to this podcast, which I think it's going to be very helpful for people out there.
Absolutely. I thought of you. I was like, I got to get him on here. But let me give you an introduction before we talk about how we met. So Jorge has 30 years of corporate finance experience. His business career includes 23 years with GE Capital and most recently 5 years at Sienna Lending Group, a small boutique commercial lender. I looked that up. It don't look so small, but okay. He has worked globally across various commercial and consumer lending industries. He earned his BA and MBA from Fairfield University. He serves on the Fairfield University Advisory Board of the Dolan School of Business and the School of Arts and Sciences and the Board of Access Education Service Program. Jorge is passionate about education and participates in various students' mentorship programs with high school and university students. Jorge immigrated from Ecuador in 1981 and currently resides with his family in Milford, Connecticut. And in spare time, he enjoys running, reading, and traveling. Running, really? Running? Long distance running, like not down the block and back, but actually running?
Yeah, marathons and half marathons.
Oh my goodness. Nope, I'm Jamaican. We are sprinters. After the 200, I'm done. I'm like, I'm relay 100. I say, I'm good. So I'm so happy to have you in the studio. So let's talk a little bit. Like, I met you through your wonderful wife, Tori, right? So that's how I met you, and we met through the Upper Bound program. And Ronnie was on here actually, who when you have to go back and listen to that episode. But I'm so glad to have you here because I thought, just knowing what I know about you through your wife, I was like, oh my goodness, this is so great, the wealth of knowledge you have just to share to the population and to our community and show them, what's possible. So tell me a little bit about your work with GE and stuff like that. How did that happen?
So when I graduated from Fairfield U, believe it or not, I was actually studying to be a counselor.
Oh.
And I was heading towards substance abuse counseling. And what happened is my mom called me and she was crying. And she said, look, I need your help. I was 22 years old, recently married, right? Because 29, literally, she's got married. And she said that my youngest half brother was getting into trouble. He wasn't going to school anymore. He was just basically rebellious. And she asked me if I could bring him to the U.S. Tori and I decided to adopt him. Reality set in pretty quick for me because once he came here, I felt the responsibility of supporting another, basically a teenager. And if you know teenagers, they eat like Pac-Mans.
Jorge, I have a 7-year-old. He eats like Pac-Man. My goodness.
Exactly. So all of a sudden, my focus shifted, right? Because I needed money. As a student, I was a graduate student, I wasn't really making or earning a significant income. So I approached my boss at that point in time, and I said to him, listen, here's my situation. I need money. I love what I'm doing, but I can't afford to do this. This doesn't pay well. And he's the one that suggested to me, well, if it's money that you need, have you ever thought of going into business? And I said, what, business? But I don't have a business background. And his point was, Jorge, you're very intelligent. You'll figure it out. Or you should apply. So anyway, I figured, in the law of numbers, statistics, let me apply to as many companies as I can. Even if I get a 1% response rate, that's 1%, right? So I applied to, believe it or not, I want to say it was 75 companies.
Wow.
And out of the 75 companies, I had 2 offers. One was to be in sales at Xerox, which I did not like. It looked like a sweatshop. And the other one was to join the financial management program at GE, which at that point in time, I didn't even know what the financial management program was. But to my pleasant surprise, it was one of the most prestigious finance training programs in the world. For at that point in time, the most admired company in the world. So those are the blessings, right? So that's how I ended up in the world of finance. It was more out of a necessity as opposed to any strategic thought process.
Look at that.
Mm-hmm.
There's a God.
Mm-hmm.
There's a God. So as we're saying that, and you're talking about bringing your brother over, what is your migration story and how has it contributed to the person you are today?
So I came from Ecuador when I was 12 years old. Like a lot of immigrants, right? We lived in an inner city. In my case, it was Bridgeport, Connecticut. And although I was young, because I was only 12 years old, right? So I realized and I knew in my heart that the United States was going to provide a lot of opportunities that I could never have in Ecuador. So it was my choice. My father asked me if I wanted to come. He's the one that brought us here. And I said, absolutely. My brothers and I, we were a big family. It was a family of, 2 adults and 7 kids, living in an apartment, in a 2-bedroom apartment. So you can imagine how crowded that was. But we had to work as soon as we got here. We didn't have the luxury to sit around, lounge. My dad needed help. Since we were too young for formal jobs, we started collecting cans and recycling cans, bottles and cans, 5 cents per can, right? So
Yeah.
we actually, believe it or not, we were the first people in Connecticut that actually went around the city collecting cans. When I told you collecting cans, we would go into garbage dumps. We would go into the city dumpster and collect cans. And the people that were drinking out in the streets, they would actually give us their cans, So
No way.
at that point in time, no one was monetizing that opportunity. It was us, right? So that was our first, call it business venture. And we were making good money. We were working all week. And each of us were, you talk about 1980. It's actually 1980. I came to 1980. That was a typo. We were making each about $80 a week, which if you adjust it for inflation, it was actually pretty
Wow.
decent money in today's dollars. But anyway, it was very hard work. It was dirty work. You can imagine, right? And then from there on, I moved on to other jobs. Once I turned 16, included every job that immigrants can relate to, right? Cooking, car washes, retail, you name it. But what I learned from that is that, hey, as long as you remain humble and you're reliable, someone that you can depend on because you work hard, you show up on time, you do things as you're told, you try to go above and beyond, that I was able to provide for myself and independent. And I think this humility and the hard work ethic that came out of it has served me very well throughout my career.
So you think that humility come from just your upbringing or, where did it come from? Because as immigrants, I realize we have that a lot. We take a lot on. We're like, we're working hard, but we're very humble at the same time. We're like, all right, we'll just wait until our time comes. So where do you think that humility
I think
come
I'm going
from?
to get a little biblical, right? I think when you are poor and you have good family values, you tend to be meek, right? You don't take anything for granted and you keep an open mind. You don't have the luxury to lose hope, right? So I think the combination of all those experiences, good family values, the fact that you always have to be optimistic regardless of the situation, and the fact that you realize that, hey, in order for me to be able to feed myself or have the basic necessities, I have to work. I can't sit and complain. In Ecuador, we don't have a welfare system like we have in the U.S., right? So you don't have the luxury of sitting around moping or crying or complaining. You have to get up and work, whether that's shining shoes, whether that's selling chocolate or candy in the streets. You have to go to work because if you don't work, guess what? No one's going to provide for you. So I think
No one.
I think all of those factors in my life is that from the day I can remember, all the adults in my life have worked very hard.
So what is your definition of success? As we are hard workers, that's for sure. We know how to work, right? So what's the definition of success?
It's it's actually a great question. Early in my life, my definition of success was primarily focused on the material things, having a nice car, having a nice job, dressing nice, having a nice house, and I think that is essential and it's part of it. But it has to go beyond that, right? Now that I'm older, I now look at success more holistically. Material success to me, it's important, but you have to look at it for what it is. It's just a tool to allow you to do other things. And the question is, what are the other things, right? And so I think it's important that as we try to define success, to ask yourself, okay, I want money for what? Why? And keep asking those questions as much as you can until you get to a point where you just can't answer it anymore, right? And then you're going to get to the essence of success. So for me, success, it's I define it as having a loving and respectful relationship with my family, with my friends, and my community. Hopefully, living this world a little better than what I experienced. And to me, that is the definition of success. All the other stuff is just noise.
When you say better than what you experience, what are you referring to?
Oh, so for example, right? Let's take a more personal perspective. As an immigrant, I came here with Zippo. I wish I could say I came here with $1 in my pocket, but I was a child. I literally had zero, right? But when you look at families that are doing well, one of the main threads is what we call generational wealth, right? But it has to start somewhere. So I felt that responsibility to build generational wealth for my family, my kids, and my grandchildren and the generations that come after. So that's one example, right? That's on a more personal perspective. On a more social perspective, there are a lot of young people who want to go to college, who aspire for a good education, a good career, whether it's technical or whether it's professional. But as you know, these days, going to school is not cheap. It's extremely expensive, right? So donating for scholarships, that to me is, to leave the world a little better than what I experienced, right?
It's amazing. So do you think you are successful in terms of the vision you had for yourself and what your family had for you? Because when we migrate, right, your family migrate here or bring you here for the opportunities, right? They have say, I'm bringing my son here, give them a chance they would never have back home, possibly wouldn't have back home. So do you think you're successful in terms of the vision you had for yourself of what your family had for you?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because in my case, my dad didn't bring us here for better opportunities. my dad brought us here to be workhorses, right? My dad he didn't come from a family that valued education. He saw it as a waste of time. He came from a family that, hey, you come in here and you work and you save a lot of money, you go back. That was his mentality, right? I think his definition of success for me was very different than my definition for success. One of the most critical things that I think people should do, and I was blessed to have done it with my wife early in my career. I think I was around 26 years old when I did this. But my wife and I sat down and we brainstormed and polished it. And eventually we came up with a mission statement for ourselves. In doing this, we were able to understand and appreciate the difference between material success and personal success. Material is only a component of personal success. That's what I mentioned before, right? We had financial goals, but we both agreed that, hey, they will only be tools for us to raise our kids the way we wanted to raise them, to have a loving family, to raise our kids to become decent human beings. And in order to do that, we had to also get involved in our communities, make sure that the communities where we're raising our kids have our support in whatever we can provide. We wanted to ensure that the next generation was set on a better footing, in a better footing than us, so they could thrive. You got to understand, as a young kid, as an immigrant, most of my time I'm going to spend on surviving. And that's something that I think we as immigrants can relate to. We're just trying to keep our head above water to survive. And I think life is more than that. Life should be about thriving. But in order for you to thrive, especially as a child, you need a lot of support. You need support from family, you need support from community. And my wife and I realized that that's important, not just for our kids, but for all kids, right?
Yes.
So in our mission statement, we laid it out. Hey, here's how we envision raising our kids. Here's how we envision our kids becoming. Here's how we envision our community to be like. Here's how we envision us working with our community. And everything that we're doing from a material standpoint is to help us do that. That's the mission. This is just a tool. So, so if I look back and you ask me that question, do I feel I've reached success? And the answer is absolutely. Because, unlike many other people, Tori and I actually designed our lives from early on, and we've been patient and we've worked hard to get to the point where we are today, right? And so this is not, I guess, the best terminology that I can use is we were very intentional. We were extremely intentional in how we wanted to live and how we wanted to administer the resources that God has given us, right? To ensure that, the day that we live here, that we can go back and say, no, not perfect, but we did it, with a sense of satisfaction.
I like that. I like the vision statement. Because, as I had my own personal financial coaching business, that's in my business plan, right? Asking for the vision statement and to come up with it. And it's one of the hardest things. Like, you have so many things that you're thinking about, but how do you capture that? And for you to capture it for your family, like, how would you suggest people go about doing that?
Well, look, for me personally, you have to have a relationship with God, whatever that God may look like for you. But I think, for me as a Christian, I've come to realize, right? And I've always known this, but now I cement it in my head, right? That the purpose of humanity is to love, right? And you're Jamaican, right? One love. But it really is, right? I mean, if you really stop and think about it and peel the onion to its essence, when you're sharing love with your family, it brings you a happiness that is beyond the understanding of humanity, right? Or it's beyond words that you can use to summarize it. When you're sharing love with your community, you feel a sense of peace, harmony, and love, right? And so to me, it's like, you have to have a sense of purpose. And, when people talk about purpose, it's amazing because that used to happen to me, right? When I was young, I used to make it very complex. Like, I have to be the next Steve Jobs and I got to come up with something big. No, what is the purpose? What is your purpose on earth, right? Yeah, a career is a tool that, that you do it for a reason, but that's not your purpose, So you gotta, and to me, the way to do it is to like really, really dig into like what's important to you. And you can't say money because money is just a tool, right? It's just, but it has to go into your spirit, into your soul. Like what makes you happy? What brings you joy? But I'm not talking about temporary happiness. I'm talking about joy that's everlasting, right? And then ask yourself, like I said, until you exhaust every possibility, why, for what, why? Because as you dig deeper, you're going to get to know yourself more. And it's also good to ask you, the people that know you best, which I would say, if you have a good relationship with your parents, you have loving parents, trust me, you will know your kids more than anybody else until they get married and then they start their married life. And then at some point, the wife or the husband will know more. But until they're away from home, you will know your kids more than anybody else. So talk to the people that you love and trust. Based on knowing, me, what makes me happy? What are the things that bring me true joy, Mom? Not temporary happiness, right? Not the happiness of playing a video game. That's a different type of happiness. And then build a mission statement around that, and then recognize that all the other stuff there's just tools to help you do that.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you make your mission statement money, you're not going to be happy.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And that's the reason why.
You'll be miserable.
I know.
Because you're always going to be chasing money.
And it's a never ending chase. And that's why I started this podcast, because it's something been in my heart since I migrated here. And I just couldn't understand why so many of us are coming and making the same mistake or running into the same obstacles. And I'm like, why are we not sharing? Why are we not telling each other? Some of the things. We share some, so like we have such a iron curtain up or this wall of secrecy, that no. Let's provide a place so we can come together. We can hear other people's stories, hear how they did it. It may not work for us, but we can see that it's possible, that we're leaving everything behind, but it is possible for us to reach whatever success it is that we want for ourselves or our family, whatever that definition may be. So I was so excited. I was like, I got to do this. I want to talk to other immigrants.
It's amazing, right? Because you got to, look, some of it's ignorance, right? You only know what you know. The other one is, it's sometimes these topics are difficult. They're very personal. In some of our cultures, we've been taught to be discreet.
Yes.
I always give people the analogy, right? I used to love how if there was a table and there was the last piece of cake and an American came in, they will just grab it, not even ask if anybody wants anything. Right? Meanwhile, I would sit there, look at it, wanting it, but not touching it because I'm thinking, okay, maybe, someone else wants it.
I know.
Right.
Can you believe that?
There are some very deep cultural values, customs that sometimes as immigrants, it prevents us from asking, it prevents us from breaking barriers. That's why I think like podcasts like the one that you're doing right now, they're very important. I try to share a lot of these with young people when I go do lectures or panel discussions or when I'm mentoring, because, we have to demystify some of this stuff.
Yeah. So what are some of the challenges you had as an immigrant and a person of color as you were climbing the corporate ladder?
Wow. This is a question that we could spend like hours. So, look, I think, the challenges as a person of color, so that's race, as an immigrant, so that's obviously cultural and socioeconomic. So I think the challenges were touching on all of those, right? Cultural, social, economic, and racial issues. For example, learning English in college, right? I had to translate a lot of the stuff that I was looking at or reading into Spanish and then understand it. And then I had to memorize it in English so I can actually be able to take a test. And here's the challenge, right? Since I came here at the age of 12, it wasn't like my Spanish was elaborate. So even when I translated stuff into Spanish, then I had to look up the words in Spanish to understand what the words mean. So you can imagine the amount of work just to be able to get through a course, right? So what a normal kid will probably spend 4 or 5 hours a week to get ready for acing a test, I would have to spend sometimes 15, sometimes 20 hours. And so that's pretty challenging, right? Another thing that I can think of, let's talk about professionally. Professionally, the challenges were more intense, and I think the reason for that is because money is involved and competition is involved. If I failed my test, no one cared, right? I was more like in the shadows, right? All of a sudden, like I went to work, all of a sudden, like people felt either threatened by me or they felt like they had to compete for me, right? Because they want to get the next promotion, the next job. They want to get the awards. They want to get the stock options. So it takes it to a different level, right? And being an immigrant with a thick accent, I don't have as much of an accent now, but when I started, you can imagine I had only been in the country for less than like 10 years. So I still had a pretty thick accent in the business world where things move extremely fast. People are impatient and they're extremely competitive. That wasn't easy. Many people in the majority, were not comfortable working with people with different backgrounds, especially like a background like mine. And sometimes they assume because of my race, because of my accent, because I spoke softly, my culture was very different than theirs. I wasn't as aggressive as people are in America. People assume that, hey, this guy's not competent. He doesn't belong here. And sometimes it was actually even more than that, right? People, I can't tell you how many times I heard people thinking, that either I was there or other people of color were there, that we were there only because of affirmative action. Yeah, that's the only reason we're there. I had to learn to navigate that world. And initially, I had to learn to survive in that world, right? But then I realized that I had to learn how to thrive in that world.
Yes.
I had to learn how to play the game while still learning to be authentic. That to me was the biggest challenge, right? As I started my career and as I started doing well and competing and playing the game, I started feeling like I was acting. I started feeling like I wasn't living in my skin. And I did not like that feeling. So I had to learn to be authentic. How do I thrive? How do I succeed while still being who I am? A poor kid that came from Ecuador with a very strong Latin culture in a world where the majority doesn't even understand what that is. So those were the challenges.
Yes, actually, as you said, affirmative action. When I started my first job, a person came up to me within the third day of being there, Jorge, and was like, "You're only here because I need to fill a quota, right?" And I'm like, And like, I mean, coming from college, I've heard this before, but it's a third day on the job. And I'll never forget it. And they told me straight out in my face, hi, welcome. You're only here because you need to fill a quota, right? Yeah. I'm like, so in my head, I'm like, okay. So I said to her, I was like, well, if that's the reason they brought me here, that's not the reason they're going to keep me. Because I was like, so my master's didn't matter. The fact that I graduated with honors doesn't matter. None of that matters. It's just that they saw me and they said, oh, yeah, it's because they didn't fill a quota. But, it's just part of, as I said, it's part of the things that the landscape that we have to navigate. So were you ever ashamed of who you are, your culture, and how did you get past that?
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily call it shame. I've never been ashamed of my culture. I think it was more a feeling of insecurity and doubt. I think those are probably like better terms for me, at least, right? I used to think in my head, like, how can I compete with these people? I stand no chance. First of all, they're white, so they understand each other. And when they sit down and they go play golf and they go play tennis and they go have their whiskeys, I don't like any of those things. So how am I going to survive in that environment, right? How am I going to get noticed? I'm not. A lot of the kids that were in there came from Harvard, from Wharton, from the top finance schools, right? I'm like, I was a freaking political science major. How am I going to survive here, right? A lot of them came from professional families, so they had a lot of resources at their disposal. If they were having a tough day at work, whether it was technical, whether it was, political, they could pick up the phone, talk to their dad, talk to their mom, talk to their older brother, talk to their cousin, their uncle, and they were provided with a lot of support. I didn't have any of that. So that created a lot of insecurity, a lot of doubt. Am I going to be able to make it here? Am I going to be able to succeed in here? Like I said, not shame, doubt. Confidence, right? Lack of confidence. How did I surpass that? Very early, there were a couple of things that were big ahas for me, right? What I noticed is, yes, these kids are smart. They came from great schools. They have a lot of support, but man, they don't work as hard as me, right? Because they've had everything easy. I have not had anything easy. So I cannot work any of them easy, right? So that was one thing. The second thing was, it's a lot more difficult to survive coming from a third world country where there was a lot of political upheaval, economic challenges, social challenges, and be able to get to college, finish college. These kids don't have any experience. Shame on me if I can't find strength and wisdom to harness my experience, right? I bring something to the table that none of these kids bring. So that was the second aha. And then the third aha for me was, okay, now that I feel confident that I can work extremely hard and I have a lot more experience than these kids, I'm still behind on the technical stuff that I have to learn. So I took an approach where I made a promise to myself, by the time I get to around 30 years old, I want to understand every aspect of the business that I'm in. I want to understand sales. I want to understand operations, the technical side. I want to understand the credit side. I want to understand the accounting, the finance. So and I had to take risks. So what that meant is if I wanted to understand that, I had to figure out a way not only to find jobs in different functions, but to accelerate that. So I took some pretty big risky positions. Some of them, people that didn't want to do it because it was a mess. I wasn't afraid of the mess because I figured that's where I'm going to learn the most. And my philosophy was, if you think of a car, right? In order for you to have a full understanding of the car, you have to understand the design from the engineer. Then you have to understand how it was manufactured. Then you have to understand, once it goes out there, how to fix it, how it breaks down. So if you talk to a mechanic, he's only going to give you one view of the car. If you want to understand the whole car, you're going to have to talk to the engineer. You're going to have to talk to the salespeople that sold the car to the dealership, and all these different functions, right? And if you can do all of that, by the time you sit down with a mechanic, you're going to know a lot more than the mechanic, right? So that was my philosophy. I want to be in a position where I know more than the average person in the business world. And in order for me to do that, I'm going to have to take jobs in as many different functions as possible so I can really broaden my knowledge. And then at some point, I'm going to have to go deep on whatever's that I like. And that's what I did. And I got to tell you, that worked out very well for me. Those three things.
Hmm. So you say it propelled your career faster than if someone who just does regular, just staying there until they get promoted and promoted.
Exactly. Look, I mean, it's I learned something fairly quick, right? Whenever you look at a job, the first thing you should do is ask for a job description. In the job description, he details very, very clearly what is the technical skills that you need to bring to the table and what is the experience that you need to bring to the table. So my philosophy is, okay, look, I'm going to master those two in 6 months. And after 6 months, I'm going to show you that I can do this on my sleep. And then I'm going to ask you, how can I help more, right? And my philosophy is if I help more, people above are going to be very happy because not only am I doing the work that they expect them to do fast and reliably, but now I'm asking them, hey, how can I help you? How can I help you more? And so they're going to, no one says, oh, no, I don't want to give work to you. No, you go home relax. People are like, okay, great. I can dump some stuff on him so I can get home early, right? And I don't mind that because they became my teachers and they were happy to do it, right? And so I learned not only what the next job is, I learned beyond the next job because I was helping my boss's boss, right? And by the time a new job opened up or the next job opened up, they said, hey, just give it to Jorge. He's already doing it, right? That's how I manage my career, right? So my career was always master what they expect from you in 3 to 6 months, make them very comfortable that you can do it reliably on time and 100% satisfied. But if you only do that, you're going to get fully meets. But then I said, okay, now that I know how to do this and I've compressed the time that it takes to do it, I've created macros, whatever, right? And now I have time. How can I help? And obviously they're like, hey, you're doing the accounting entries. I need help with the reconciliations. Let me teach you how to do that so you can help me with that. Guess what? I was already learning the next job. Right?
That is brilliant. That is brilliant. So keeping on that same vein, like as you said, some of that stuff, what advice, adding to what you just said, would you give a young person that is trying to find their place and is caught between what you went through, the two cultures of the United States and that of their parents?
Well, I think for us as immigrants, the one thing that we have to be careful is that, and this is a natural human instinct, right? That you want to be where you're comfortable. So as an Ecuadorian, I would be comfortable being in Bridgeport. Being around people that spoke Spanish, being around restaurants where I could eat the food that I like, going to places where I can dance my music and be with people that know how to dance my music and enjoy dancing my music, right? And I think sometimes as a result of that, we tend to isolate ourselves. And we tend to compartmentalize. Hey, I go to work, I come, do my 9 to 5, I'm done, then I go to where I'm comfortable. And I think that's dangerous. And I think that's, that can be very limited. And then another thing too, as immigrants, right? Sometimes our initial reaction to the challenges in culture and socioeconomic issues and racial issues is to just focus on working extremely hard because that's what we know how to do. And the problem is, right, that you can work yourself out of a life. And as hard as you work, it may still not help you get to where you need to, right? So I think it's good. It's a good work ethic is good, but I think you need to go beyond that, right? So I'm not, and you can't thrive in an environment where all you're doing is, if the American is working 40 hours and the way you're going to differentiate yourself is by working 60 hours, that's not sustainable. And at some point that, you're impacting your health, you're impacting your life. And I did that, by the way. So I'm speaking from experience, right? I worked my butt off because I used to think like, hey, if I work my butt off, they're never going to fire me because, I'm so reliable and they're so dependent on me. And what happened is they kept piling up more work on me, right? And then I missed time with my family. I was stressed out. I was overworked. That's not healthy. And it's hard to thrive in that environment, right? So to me, the best advice I can give people is, look, you have to integrate. You have to figure out how to integrate. And you have to figure out how the game is played. And in order to do that, you're going to have to take some serious risks. You're going to have to put yourself out there, right? You're going to have to start building relationships with people that you may not like or that you may feel they don't understand you or are very different than you. And in order to build relationships, you have to understand that it's not transactional, right? It's not like, hey, you sell me a burger, I say thank you and I pay you. That's the end. No, you have to understand really how to build relationships, right? But it's important because that's the only way people are going to get to know you. And that's the only way people are going to feel comfortable sharing with you their wisdom, their understanding of how things work. That's the way you're going to learn how to play the game. In that process, even though sometimes it can seem daunting, but there's a way to do that while still showing people who you are and helping them appreciate your culture, right? So how often do we say, hey, I want you to come to my house and have dinner with us and my family? We'd love to have you. If they invite you to a concert of, let's say, rock music, right? Go, right? Go. I mean, you gotta learn to break bread with people, right? And so don't isolate. Don't focus just on working hard, thinking that's the only way that you're going to be able to survive. Life is more, professional life is more than surviving. You have to thrive. You need good mentors, and you need mentors that can truly, truly tell you honestly how things work so that you understand how the game is played. And those are not easy things sometimes for us immigrants, especially first generation, right, to do. But you have to figure it out. You have to, don't isolate. Get out there and figure out how to integrate. And don't be shy. And the worst that can happen to you is that someone says no, and then you move on to the next person and you move on. You can't just, you can't sell yourself short. And sometimes it's hard because I remember some people used to think that, like, oh, look at him, he thinks he's white. I don't know how. That's people from our own place, and you're like, no, I'm not white. I happen to be very Ecuadorian. I happen to enjoy good Ecuadorian food. I happen to enjoy going to church with people like myself. What I'm doing is I'm trying to figure out how this works. And in order for me to figure out how this works, I'm building good relationships with people that are different than me. So, but it's amazing sometimes how our own people, our own culture can put pressure on us to keep isolating. And you have to be careful about that.
Yes, very much so. Yes, I've experienced that myself. I like what you said about you can work yourself out of life, because I caught myself, but my husband and I was like, wait a minute, we know how to do the work thing. I mean, I've been working. I never not work. Bad grammar, but I never not work. So I've always said, no, my family taught me how to work, not how to manage my money well, obviously. So what is your money story and how has money impacted, changed, or improved your life?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, right, I was very poor. My family, obviously we came to the U.S. for a reason, right? So we're very poor. Early in my career, I was focused on finding financial stability, right? That was the focus for me. For once in my life, I want to feel like at least I can pay the bills and I have a place to sleep and I have food on the table. For most people, those necessities are they take it for granted because they've never had to really worry about it. In our case, I did have to worry about that stuff. I know what homelessness is. I know what going hungry is. So for me, it was just focused on, hey, I need to get a job that gives me enough money so I can have financial stability, right? And so that I can work hard, get promoted, and have more certainty that financial stability is sustainable. And I was blessed, that I like I said, I ended up pursuing a career in finance, not by choice, by necessity, but I was blessed enough that I happened to begin my career in one of the best companies in the world. Not only did it provide me with financial stability that I never had growing up, but it also enabled me to provide for my family, to provide, to help my extended family, my brothers, my sisters, my mom, and my community, right? But, here's the thing, right? It also allowed me to, for the first time in my life, start saving. Growing up, not having that slush fund for the rainy days was extremely difficult, right? So if my car broke down, I was in a lot of trouble, right? Because I had to go to work while saving money to fix the car. Not having savings was a huge issue for me, right? So I think for me, that's how money initially was, right? It was financial stability. It was the ability to make sure that that financial stability was sustainable. It was the opportunity to now be able to help my family, both immediate as well as extended, and then wherever I can, my community. And then it was to save money. So I no longer live with that fear that, oh my God, next year we're going to be in trouble. We're not going to have food, or we're not going to have blah, 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 or we're going to get kicked out of the apartment. So that was, that's kind of how money has impacted me from that perspective.
So you said that the value, the definition of money have changed for you throughout your years as you kept going.
Yeah. So absolutely, right? I think, we as immigrants don't understand money for what it is. We have to really step back and understand it. I think money is a limiting term. I think we have to use the word capital instead of money, because it encompasses anything that has purchasing value. You got to stop looking at money as whenever you think of a dollar, you got to say, okay, think of I have a dollar to purchase stuff, purchasing power, right? And so, but when you look at capital, it's broader, right? It entails precious metals, whether it's gold, silver, whatever that may be. It entails real estate. It entails a lot of other things, right? Stocks, you name it. So I think we need to have that conversation, right? It's not just about money. It's understanding capital, and we live in a capitalist society, right? And I think many people don't understand what that means and how it works. And it's a real tragedy, because these are things that should be taught as part of a basic primary and secondary education. Someone should walk out there with a full understanding of what capital is, how it works, and how they can access it, manage it, get it, obtain it, you name it. So I think for me, the value and the definition of money has changed from what we just said, currency in order to be able to have financial stability, to capital, which is how do you build it, how do you manage it, how do you get it, and how do you grow it.
Yeah, good point. I never look at it that way. So what is one of the important factors that you think we need to know? As I know you just mentioned it, but what are the main points you think we need to know about money, but we never got the memo?
Okay, so this is the big memo, right? The thing that we don't know that we should know. And that is the difference between labor and capital income. If there's one thing that I wish anyone in your audience walks away with, is make sure you understand the difference between labor and capital income. What do I mean by that, right? Believe it or not, as a finance person, it took me a while to understand this, which is kind of, if for a finance person, it's difficult to understand this, I can only imagine for a layman person, right? Like I told you before, right? I was always focused on working extremely hard and hoping for a decent raise or promotion, right? And a normal year, a decent raise would be a little bit above inflation or equal to inflation. So my purchasing power didn't really change much, right? I wasn't making a lot of money. So if I got a 4% raise and things went up 4%, nothing really changed. And then if I got a promotion, depending on the promotion, that's when something changed, right? I would get like either a 10% raise or maybe a little bit better than that, but not a game changer, right? A little bit better. I got to put savings, but not a lot, right? And so then, 2008 came. And 2008 for me, as for many other people, it was the worst financial crisis that I had experienced in my life until that point in time. And until now, it's still the worst financial crisis, right? What happened in that financial crisis? I saw people losing their homes. I saw marriages break up, families break up. For me personally, my net worth went from here to like almost nothing. My 401k, which was one of my biggest assets at that point in time, dropped by like 70%. The value of my home, where we thought we had a lot of equity, dropped. When I say probably like 60%, I'm probably exaggerating. No, I'm not exaggerating. I'm probably underestimating it, because at that point in time, there was no concrete way to really figure out what the value of your house was unless you wanted to sell it, which we didn't. And because I was in the financial services industry, which was the industry that got hit the hardest, I was at an extremely high risk of losing my job, right? And it wasn't the time to lose a job, because many people out there couldn't find jobs. There were no jobs to be had in finance. So you can imagine the anxiety that I felt as being the main provider for my family, the breadwinner, as we call it. That wasn't fun. And that's when I realized, my company laid off 25% of its employees during that time. So, that's when I realized that, I don't ever want to feel that vulnerability again. I don't ever want to feel like, I'm so dependent on my company for my income or for my insurance, you name it. It was a horrible feeling. And my wife and I, at that point in time, decided to start investing, and we started buying real estate, not really knowing what we were doing, but doing enough diligence to make sure that we're not doing anything crazy that's going to blow up on us and we're going to lose everything that we had. Because we literally, when we bought our first house, we took out loans from our 401k, we maxed some credit cards, we took out any little equity that was in the house, because at that point in time, you had to put a lot of cash down. It was a difficult market. But, the beauty of it is, as a finance person, and Tori also, as you know, Tori is extremely smart. The two of us kind of looking at things and learning very quick, we finally realized the difference between labor income and capital income. And this is what I'm getting at, right? Labor income depends on you working. Some people may own a business, right? Some people may own a little shop where they, I don't know, a variety store, or where they cut hair, and they think they're capitalists. I'm the CEO. No. You're just a laborer like everybody else. You're an accountant. I was a finance person. I was a laborer. I just happened to do finance as my labor. But there was no difference between me and someone who's, out there collecting cans, or someone out there who's, collecting garbage. The only difference is in the kind of work that we do and what we get paid. And what I mean by that is, if you get into an accident, you can't work anymore, or you die, that income goes away. That's it. Your wife and your kids get nothing more. That's it. No more income. So therefore, it's dependent on your ability to do labor, right? Capital income is the opposite of that. It's independent of you. You can be sleeping and you're still making your income. You can be, on vacation or in the hospital, and the income still comes, because it's coming from capital, not from your labor, right? And once we kind of figure that out, we were able to accelerate how we went about purchasing homes, managing homes, and then also managing our other investments, because now we understood that, hey, in order for us to grow this, we have to figure out how it works. And once we figure out how it works, we have to become experts at managing our investments the way that coincides with the way it works. We can't do things opposite of how it works, right? And I think that's where a lot of people fail. But to me, that's the big aha, right? And as you get older, you need to make sure that you are building capital income, because at some point you're not going to be able to work anymore. In today's world, there are no pensions anymore. Very few people get pensions. 401ks are good, but they're just a supplement. Social Security, we don't even know if it's going to be there or not, or what it's going to look like. So you have to build capital income. You have to. And to me, that is, if you want to build generational wealth, if you want to build financial freedom, if you want to have the financial resources to live out your mission the way you envision it, the way you design it, you have to build capital income.
It's a lot. I like that. I like that a lot. Actually, as you're talking, my wheels are turning. I'm like, okay, I got to jump on that. I was like, hubby, Derek, where are you? We gotta start our capital income. No, seriously. Yeah. We've been thinking about, we've been having those conversations, and those are along the lines where, like, if something should happen, if something should happen to you, something happened to me. We have very young children. What happens to the family? We got to start from scratch. We're going to move back to an apartment. Like, what is going on? So you definitely need to be making money while you are sleeping. So, Jorge, would you say, was it worth it leaving your country, starting over in a new land, looking back? Could you have accomplished success at the same level in your homeland? Or you think, nah?
It's a question that as an immigrant, you ask yourself, especially early on, every day, right? Especially when you feel you don't fit, when things are challenging, when you confront racial issues, you ask yourself, what am I doing here? But I can tell you one thing, and the way to encapsulate this, if you ask me today, Jorge, do you see yourself as an Ecuadorian or as an American? I will absolutely 100% tell you that I am 100% American. And the reason why I say that is because I integrated myself into the American culture, right? And when I say integrated, in every possible way, meaning I figure out how the American system works, and I make sure that I'm a beneficiary and that I can thrive in that system. I don't regret at all, not even 1% living in Ecuador. I know for a fact that, while it is possible to accomplish some things in Ecuador, it's extremely difficult. The opportunities sometimes are not there. And it's a system, Ecuador, like the rest of Latin America, it comes from a very oligarchic system where very few own the majority of resources, and they do anything and everything to protect it. So if you're a poor kid and you want to share some of that pie, unless you have good godfathers and godmothers, which obviously I didn't, because when you come from a poor family, you don't have connections, right? So you're always just trying to survive in that system. The U.S. is not a system where you only have to limit yourself to surviving. Here's where you can thrive. And I think if you talk to any, it's amazing to me how sometimes Americans complain, there are no jobs, these towns, the Rust Belt, it's all, and I'm saying to myself, move, go to the world, go to the city, work, start collecting cans, and then, figure it out from there. But that's because I'm an immigrant. So I come from I have a different perspective, right? I see nothing but opportunity in the U.S. They see nothing but despair, which is really sad.
Yeah.
But yeah, no regrets.
Awesome. No, honestly, I do that too. I was driving down the road. I'm like, oh, that would be a great opportunity. Oh, we could do that. Hey, I'm always seeing the possibility in things. And you're right. Yeah. It could be because being an immigrant and migrating here, we know what is where we're coming from. Then we're coming here. We're like, oh man, this is lovely. This is great education.
Well, what I told you before, right? Once I realized what it took for me to get from being a kid in Ecuador to get into GE, and the amount of discipline, hard work, focus, and the tenacity to get there, I realized there's not a single other kid at GE that can beat me. It's up to me to decide how far I want to go up, because the amount of skills and experience that you need to be able to get from point A to that point where I told you GE, it's not just survival, it's intelligence. You have to really strategy, right? So that's why, to me, when I see a young person that's first generation that made it to college but is having financial difficulties to get into college, to me is like, okay, that young man or that young woman has shown me that they have the discipline, that they have the vision, that they have the work ethic, that they have what it takes. So I have to help them. And for the most part, I'm not going to be disappointed, because I know what kind of kid it takes to get there, right? It's not easy.
Amazing. No, it's not. So what was one of the biggest shock for you when you migrated?
From the minute I walked in, because I got to remember I came here at the age of 12. So I came in September or August. So it was right when we started school. And from the minute I walked in here, one of the things that really shocked me and took me aback is how American people focus so much on material stuff. When I walked into school, I was dressed the way I dressed in Ecuador, because I had to bring my clothes from Ecuador, right? And kids started making fun of the shoes that I was wearing because they didn't have the brand, or the pants that I was wearing because they didn't have the brand, and they were pretty mean about it, And while as I got older, people weren't as callous as the young people. They were still focused on material stuff. Am I driving the right car? Am I living in the right town? Is my house the right size? And to me that was shocking, right? And I knew that if I wanted to reach the goals so I can live out my mission, I had to think differently. I cannot get caught up in that. So an example of that is, right, I was an executive at GE, and I was still driving my 12-year-old Nissan Xterra that worked, but it was old, but I didn't care. It had air conditioning, it had a radio. That's all I needed, right? I had to make a choice whether I could afford to live in New Canaan and Darien. For me, it was a combination of, is that where I want my kids raised? Is that where I want my family raised? And two, do I really want to be a slave to a huge mortgage and have the pressure? And then, so Tori and I decided, you know what, we're gonna define what our cap is in terms of lifestyle, and then we don't care whether we have a lot of money to move up. We're gonna stay there. That's where we're gonna stay because that's more than enough, right? And I think that's important because you have to. How do you don't want to be like most American people. See, most American people are income rich, asset poor, right? My goal was to be, asset rich, income middle class, right? So I manage everything so that today we're income and cash flow, middle class, asset rich. And that to me is what's going to give you that financial freedom to then live out your mission. If you're just keeping up with the Joneses and getting stuck in that material world, you'll be income rich and asset poor. That's not a good place to be.
No, it's not. No, that's a nice way of putting it. So what are you doing now since you have retired, or what's next for you?
Yeah, first of all, I'm too young to be retired, Petra. I don't get Social Security nor Medicare, so I'm not. I wish I was there, but I'm not there. I still have a while to go, so I still have to work. But most of my work now is as a capitalist as opposed to a laborer, so it's a lot more fun, right? So on a professional side, I get to manage investments and make sure that the investments are doing what they need to be doing. So upset, budgets, monitor the budgets and see, capital allocation, right? Every year we have to figure out where our capital goes. I'm still working. And then, the rest of my time is living out my mission, right? Which is basically sharing my love with my family, with myself, and with my community. So what we do is, I serve on the board of trustees of Fairfield University. So in addition to being on the advisory board of the business school, I'm actually on the board of trustees of the university now. Tori and I, we found a scholarship for first generation students. We've been doing that for a long time. We will continue to do that, and our goal is to continue to do that. And then once we leave this earth, to actually drop a pretty good chunk of our wealth into that scholarship.
Amazing.
Yeah. And then we're starting a foundation in Ecuador, with families, indigenous families. There are remote towns of indigenous people in Ecuador who are literally the forgotten people. And if you want to understand poverty, all you got to do is spend a day with them, and you'll see it. So Tori and I literally are just getting it off the ground. This time that we went to Ecuador was kind of like the first funding that we did, and we're hoping to formalize it a little more as we learn, as we work with those communities. But the purpose of that is to empower families that are primarily led by women, because unfortunately a lot of men they're not doing their job. And so these are women with children who are just trying to figure out how to survive. And when I say empowering, we're not giving them food or money. I think that's very dangerous, actually. So what we're doing is working with them to understand job opportunities for income, and helping them in that process. So, for example, they're indigenous, they're agricultural. So we bought 3 families a pregnant cow, because the pregnant cow allows them to, one, get milk and sell the milk in the market. It allows them to now have a baby calf that they can raise. And if it's a cow, they can get additional income from the milk that it produces. If it's a bull, they can raise it and at some point sell it and exchange it for another cow. Another family, we're helping with all the supplies to create a field of grass where cattle can be fed, where she can lease that so the cattle can eat, as well as sell the hay to other people that are raising cattle. So our goal is to basically make sure that they have opportunities.
That's amazing. Yes. Okay. So, let us know when you get it off the ground. Make sure you come back to the podcast and then talk how we can help. All right. So as we know, we're coming down to an hour, but thank you. What is one of the biggest lessons learned?
Yeah, material success is good, but be careful. It does not equate directly with happiness and joy and everlasting, right? So for me, having a clear mission statement on how you plan to allocate the financial success is critical. As I keep mentioning that, right? Uh, you know, and let me explain to you, give you an example of how that helped me in real terms, right? So I worked extremely hard, as I mentioned to you, and at the age of 29, I was given two opportunities. One was to be the chief commercial officer in Australia, for all of Australia, and he wants to be the chief risk officer for all of Italy for GE. Big jobs, right? For a young person, big jobs, and I felt like, hey, you know what? I deserve this. I worked so hard. And Tori was, as an extremely wise woman, said, absolutely not. She goes, I'll follow you if you can help me understand what it is that you're chasing that you can't find here at home. And she explained to me and she reminded me, that it was never our vision or our purpose to, roam around the world making more money, that we wanted our kids to be decent human beings, to grow up in a community where they have roots, where they can feel they belong. And she's like, and you're trying to basically exchange that for more money. And I don't get it. It was the hardest decision I made, but I decided to say no to both of those jobs and actually take a little bit of a sideways turn on my career and remove myself from the fast track executive path. But I did it. And I wasn't sure if it was the right decision at that point in time. I was a little bit angry with Tori. I was angry at myself. I felt like I worked so hard. But now that I'm older and I look back, I'm like, man, that was the best decision I made. Had I taken that job, I probably would be divorced. I probably would have no relationship with my kids. They probably wouldn't even know who I am. My kids probably would have a lot of problems. They would have not grown up with their cousins. I would have been a whole different lifestyle. And I would be probably not in the US, because once you go international, you just become an international executive. So every 2 years, you're working in a different country, right? Sounds sexy. It sounds like, wow, that's very successful. I would have been one unhappy person.
Wow. So with that, what kind of legacy are you building or leaving for your children? Do you think they'll be able to manage it, and build on what you have started?
Yeah. So the first thing that I think is, giving them a good foundation, right? And that's in every sense of the word, right? Making sure that they're good human beings with good values, with good, a good head on their shoulders. Because to me, if I did that, then they should be fine on their own, right?
Mm-hmm.
The second thing is, like I told you before, right? Building generational wealth. But, here I'm a little different than most immigrants. In Ecuador, the philosophy is that, everyone's your kid and every kid deserves, a part of it, an equal part of it. I don't believe that at all. To me, it's, I'm in that sense, I'm a hardcore Christian. My generational wealth will probably be allocated to where it's going to bear fruit, right? So I'm not going to give it to a kid that's just a number. But like I said, hopefully my kids have a good head on their shoulders, but they'll have to earn their way into any generational wealth. It's not going to be given to them just because. It's not an entitlement. It's a gift. So I think those two things. And then, listen, my kids are also it's my community as well, right? So I'll really share with you some of the things that we're doing. And we're going to continue to do that and grow that.
Wow. So what message would you give to a family that are in the process of migrating to the States based on your experience?
So when we say a migrant family, we have to obviously, because you can have a migrant family that's upper class in Ecuador.
Yes.
I'm not talking to them. Okay, I'm talking to the traditional migrant family, people that come from a poor country. They are either working class or struggling, and they're coming to the U.S. in search of opportunity. Right? If the immigrant is an older person, when I say older than 18 years old, I will explain to them, listen, life is going to be hard here. No, I'm not going to sugarcoat it for you. You're going to have to do jobs that you probably thought in your life you will never do back in your country. Here in the U.S., we don't look down upon any job. Here, every job is dignified. So understand that and work hard. I will tell them that, in order for them to move beyond surviving, they're going to have to work extremely hard, be dependable, and integrate themselves so that people in their jobs can see and appreciate who they are, and things will work out fine. But what I also told them, I said, look, that's just one piece of the puzzle. Here's the big piece of the puzzle, right? And that's your children and the generations that come after. And the opportunities for them here in the U.S. are going to be the same as they were for me. And if you foster and if you nourish your kids, their upbringing, so that they follow the right path, not only are their lives going to change, but you're really going to change generations afterwards. And that is the real blessing of being in the U.S. So don't lose hope, don't give up. Those times when you're working extremely hard, maybe you're working 2 jobs, maybe you're working at night, you're tired. Just remember the big picture. What is the you after you?
Yes, I'm a living testament of that. I am here because of that big picture. My mom kept us and just keep feeding us that hope, always spoke in the future, like we're going to be out of this situation. So, Jorge, what is one saying or proverb that your parents or family member always say or use?
Yeah, so I actually, say this to my kids, and they can, if you ask any of my kids and tell them, hey, is this what your dad said? They'll all tell you, yes, he told us that all the time. And I told them, look, this is in simple terms: respect and honor your body, your mind, and your spirit, and respect and honor those of your fellow men. You'll be fine if you do that. Everything else will fall in place. That's just, remember that. Respect and honor your body, respect and honor your soul, your mind, and respect and honor your spirit. And do the same thing for others. And if you do that, you will be on a good path.
Awesome. Yay, I like that. Any last words of advice, encouragement, wisdom you like to share? It gave us a lot. I mean, I got to go back. I'm going to talk to my husband tonight and try to implement some of these things. So with a vision statement, but any last words of advice or encouragement you have?
Yeah, like I said, right? The biggest advice I have is, look, your mission statement is going to be the essence. And always remember that. That'll be your guiding light. That'll be the lighthouse that helps you navigate when the waters get rough. In terms of financial aspects, truly understand how the capital system works. There's tons of resources. All you got to do is YouTube, rate value. A lot of it's free too, right? You really have to not only learn it theoretically, but start living it. Don't be afraid to take risks. I wouldn't be where I am if I didn't take risks. And for a child that was extremely poor, just sitting down and having a professional dinner the first time with people at work was extremely challenging and risky. But I did it. The worst that could have happened to me is that I ordered the wrong thing and whatever. And I ate it. I ate it out of being shy. But you have to take risks. And, I mentioned that.
Yeah.
I had to take jobs that took me outside of the country, take jobs that people didn't want because they felt like, oh no, that place is a mess. There's going to be a lot of work and you might lose your job. You might sink with the ship. And to me, it was like, okay, that's where I'm going to learn the most, because, that's where all the bad decisions are now manifesting themselves. So I'm going to be able to do a post-mortem of that and come out with a great education, right? You have to take risks. I had to live in a community of white people when I moved my family to Shelton. That was a risk. I felt uncomfortable. That was okay. Feeling uncomfortable, be ready to be uncomfortable. Get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
I like that.
But you got to take risks, right? And for an immigrant, especially first generation immigrant, going to college and all that stuff, that's going to be your life path. So if you're unwilling to take risks, you're going to struggle quite a bit. So be smart about it, be thoughtful about it, educate yourself, find the right mentors, but don't be afraid to take risk.
Yay! Hear that, people? Don't be afraid to take risks. I've taken a lot myself. Some worked out and some way. Someone's like, Petra, you knew better.
Yeah, the only other thing I would add is, we do a good job in terms of figuring out how to get into the business world, how to get money and all that stuff. But we don't do a good job in saying, this is when I stop. And I transition into my mission statement.
Yeah.
And if you look at it, humans are the only people that want to accumulate stuff. All the other animals A bird only does a nest to be able to lay an egg, hatch the egg. But as soon as the egg is hatched, it moves on, right? They're not saving the nest for like 50 years,
That is so true. I never thought of that. That is so true.
Well, yeah, but so you have to know when to get out of the game as well, because nothing's sadder than seeing an old person who's worked their entire life and never got a chance to live out their mission because they were focusing on accumulating more stuff.
Yeah.
So the other piece of advice too, have a strategy on how to get there, but also have a strategy of when to get out of there to do what you love. I could be working right now. I could be working, making whatever I was making, still, traveling to New York or wherever, flying wherever. I don't need to anymore. So I get to do the stuff that that mission statement, right? I get to live out my mission now. That has now become somewhat secondary in my priorities, right? And I think a lot of people don't have a strategy on that, and they just work until they die and never got a chance to live out their mission. I think that's tragic.
Wow. People, you hear it here on Island Money 365. Get your mission statement ready. Go to your spouse. If you're single, get an accountability partner. Work on your mission for your life, for your family, and then make sure you're working towards that, because that's what will keep you on track to have that success that you envision for yourself. All right? Right, Jorge? Did I get that right?
Yes, you did. Got it.
Okay. So thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate all the knowledge and nuggets that you dropped for us. I know the listeners are gonna love it. Absolutely. So until next time, people.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you. This is Island Money 365. Until next time, keep your money irate. Wait. Hold on there. My beautiful people, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and tap that notification bell. We are here every second and fourth Sunday of the month. Also, the information for our guests can be found in the show notes. So what you wait for? Wanna subscribe?